smoked a turkey one year in like the, it wasn't a Traeger, it was a
Good evening, William and Marissa on Zoom. Are you both able to hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
I like the shark in the background.
Great, thank you. Marissa, are you able to hear me? I'll just assume so.
So did I, Seth. For the longest time, I was like, man, that's a cool basement there in Coburg. Yeah. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't even know we had basements here in Coburg. Yeah.
it's 6 p.m. and I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. On the agenda, the next item is a roll call. I'm here, Jim Bell, Chair. Please go ahead and go around and introduce yourself and tell me if you're here.
Commissioner Derby is present.
Commissioner Marshall is present. Vice Chair Seth Clark is present. Barry Beatty, present.
And William is.
I'm present.
Okay.
Sorry.
And we are assuming Marissa is present. Okay, so agenda review. We have a few things to go through tonight. One of the more interesting things is to look at a work plan for next year. You should have received the minutes from the November meeting. Is there a motion to change, adopt, or do anything with those minutes?
I move we approve them.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
All those in favor of adopting accepting the minutes from the November meeting, say aye. Aye.
I will abstain because I wasn't here for the meeting.
Do we have any public testimony this evening?
We have no one signed up to provide testimony.
And we'll move on to the commission business for tonight, which is to look at a work plan for 2024. And like to ask people for any ideas. I have a couple, but I thought I'd put those in at the end. Any thoughts about what we might want to tackle next year? We sometimes get a little in the nitty gritty about this intersection or that lot. Would anybody have any interest in the 30,000-foot view? What do we want Coburg to be like in 10 years?
I do have a question in this regard. Yeah. Since he brought it up and it's in the future. When we were looking out at our urban growth plan and quite frankly, our city limits, street development and street, the description or identification between local, arterial, collector. Classification, okay, very good. Have we done something along those lines of projected roads that we anticipate being those particular classifications, and whether or not we should, if not?
There are a lot of processes around an urban growth boundary analysis that include planning for transportation and land use in an integrated way. The city had applied for a grant to do a buildable lands inventory, which was kind of our first step at looking at the 20-year supply of land that the city of Coburg has. We were not awarded that grant this cycle. And so we're looking at ways to we have not talked about street reclassification at this time, but there is conversation about, yes, our city limits essentially match our urban growth boundary, which indicates we may um, want to look at that situation soon. So yes and no, in that it is kind of on the horizon, but nothing as specific as designating streets or which area would be expanded.
Is that something that the planning commission will be involved in or can be involved in?
Certainly. When we begin to do that analysis, as I have tried to keep you all appraised of our grant application process, you will all be, the planning commission will be receiving that information for review and input once we get to the analysis portion.
The only reason I bring that up is Coleman comes to mind, and the fact that how Coleman was made out, built out over time, but now it's become a pretty major road. I don't know exactly what its classification is, but there's quite a bit of traffic coming on Coleman. And whether or not we can identify those kinds of streets going forward before development or in the development process that we can identify, yeah, that's going to be a collector street, if you will. So therefore our standards should be
Yes, I don't think we're quite that far along, because we're not sure which direction the city will expand. So, as far as Coleman is concerned, that is actually a topic for the Transportation Safety Ad Hoc Committee that will begin meeting, in January. So, on the Coleman side, yes, we'll be looking at traffic calming measures on Coleman. I believe it actually is classified as a collector. And then like I said, the city begins to look at that larger analysis of possibilities where expansion could occur, because we're not anywhere near knowing that at this point.
well, I
think
just
that would
looked at the area to the north here, where the school is in that field, that is within the city limits.
Yes, it is.
That's all I had.
Maybe as another starting point, I just want to let everybody know that I wrote the 23 work plan goals on there, just as a reminder. I also have them printed if anybody wants to take a reminder. Okay.
I have my computer, so I can type.
If you could share with your neighbor.
Been sharing one.
Share with
Yeah,
your
we're
neighbor.
good. I'll take it.
So Megan, how do you think we did on the communication with staff, city council, and other committees? How do you think we did 2023 on that particular goal? Any improvement? What do you think?
It's hard for me to compare because I didn't necessarily have this role in years prior. I know that council is prioritizing communication with the commission and with other committees. I think there's always room for improvement, but I think that we have a pretty good communication with some, especially individual commissioners. And if anybody ever wants any further updates, I'm always available for that. I think we have, struggled with kind of getting our meetings on track and attendance and that kind of thing, but I think it's on the improvement.
I have a question. City council has several groups that act in an advisory capacity to the city council, such as parks and recreation, trees, heritage. We as planning commissioners don't have direct interaction with them at all. Is that something that could be arranged sometime in the future? some of what we as planning commissioners deal with relates to what those committees have. And I know we just make recommendations and not decisions. Still would be nice.
Planning commission does make some decisions.
We do, for instance, with Heritage Committee and, it would be nice to at least know who they are, know what they do. Same with Trees and Parks. Is that something that could be allowed by the city council since they're the creator of those committees?
I would think so. It's something I'd have to look into a little bit more, but I believe that they would be supportive of that. City council also has liaisons that represent the council and come to the meetings of the other committees and commissions. The counselor that was assigned to planning commission recently resigned from the city council. And so we haven't really had that this year, but I expect in 2024, we'll have a new liaison that will help bridge that link to the council. But I think especially, well, Heritage and Parks, you know, there's a lot of overlap between long-range planning and all of the committee work that happens here. So I think if that's something we'd like to put on the easel as far as, how would you like to word that?
Develop a partnership, develop a communication?
Communication?
Yeah. I also, the Main Street group, the business community, somebody we need to have some dialogue with as well.
Megan, could you, and maybe this is not a 2024 work item, but kind of at least catch me up and maybe the rest of the commissioners too, as far as where we are with our urban growth bound in our study and the transportation plans. And are we behind state requirements to get those done, or?
Putting that timeline together as far as regulatory requirements and deadlines is something that will be part of the planning department work plan for this year. So what we do know is that our urban growth boundary and our city limits are very closely aligned, which means that we are due to look at our lands supply. The last buildable lands inventory was done, forget exactly when, I believe it's been over 10 years. So it was before several of the new subdivisions were built. It was before we changed some provisions in the code to allow for higher density, to allow for different housing types. So the analysis of the buildable lands is kind of the first step in looking at that urban growth boundary possible expansion. So that's why we were trying to look at applying for that grant this year to kind of begin that process. We're not sure where it will exactly lead. We're not behind on anything in a sense that we are not following state requirements or anything that extreme, but it is something that the city could have in its advantage to be proactive in looking at and thinking intentionally about how the city can maintain control of growth in the future. And so I don't want to say, like I said, that we're in some sort of trouble with the state or something like that. But I do think this is the time to be starting these conversations.
You know, a follow-up question, when we were putting the wastewater plans together and there was, I think, Portland State had a population growth projection
Yes,
for Coburg. And there was some discrepancies. about
yes, very much so.
You know if they have changed at all or anything, or have they even gone back and recalculated?
Yes, so Portland State University, PSU, provides population estimates every single year to every jurisdiction. And so they also provide a 20-year projection. So they say, this is what you have today, this is what you're going to have in 20 years, and the city needs to be able to show that we have enough residential, employment, and open space recreational land for the population that they're projecting. I believe you're correct in that when a lot of this work was done, those numbers were expected to be a lot higher than where we actually are today. And the growth is happening, but it's in a lot smaller increments than they were anticipating in a decade ago. And so by that theory, we may not have the demand that was required at that time as well. So that's why all of these things kind of tie in together, and it ties into infrastructure planning, as you mentioned. What is our water demand? What is our wastewater capacity? All of those are intertwined in that long-term vision and planning.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just curious about Portland State, because I know the population estimate was, like I mentioned, considerably less than what we were calculating.
Yes,
And just wondering if their anticipated growth is gonna be less than again, then as you said, it's gonna make a big difference on our infrastructure and where the urban growth money goes. I mean, you don't need the land.
right, right. And that's another reason some of those higher density, different housing types play in, because if you can fit more here, then you don't have to here. So that's why the outdated inventory is so important to update. And I can pull up anytime if we want to do it right now, or we want to do it later, or you want to do it on your own. You can do an online search for Portland State University population estimates, and you can pull up the table that will show you not only Coburg, but every projection that they've done, and you can follow it out for the 20 years.
Great, thanks.
Well, I think our number one goal for 2023 could be continued on with our training and getting information to us and pertinent stuff that we need to deal with and be up to speed on. Doesn't hurt. So even if it's just a matter of you sending us just tidbits of information for, that's useful in our decision making, if you will, or processes.
That were tangible check off. I love these. Patrick, who is our DLCD representative. I don't know if you would be interested in that specific to say, we want to have 2 in-person trainings, be with Patrick and one other person.
Yeah, it'd be good. Love to have that.
I also think the relevant topics is something that has been on my staff work plan as well. And thinking about applications that we are pretty confident will be coming in at some point. One that really comes to mind is the 107 acres of light industrial land on the east side of I-5 that will go through a master plan process. So another idea that I had was getting both myself and you all familiar with that master plan process and what we can expect soon.
That's excellent.
I was gonna ask where we were on that and kind of where we were in the process, so that's great, it's perfect.
Great.
You're saying that's coming soon?
We don't know for sure, but it sounds like the property will be ready to market soon. There was an extensive wetlands delineation process, some other things that the developer, the owner, needed to go through. But I anticipate that in 2024, that will be ready to go to market. It's my understanding there is not a lot of light industrial land, especially with that much acreage that close to I-5. So it could happen really quickly, maybe not. We're not sure on that part, but Either way.
At the very least, it would be really good for us to know the process. and
Either-
What's next, for sure.
Does the, for that east side property, does the transportation committee have any voice in what goes on or not?
the Transportation Safety Committee,
Yeah.
that is not something that is within their scope of work at this time.
So this is just my observation, but the I-5 interchange there seems to be at or above its capacity as is, and to add more could cause chain domino effect throughout the traffic flow of town. Do we have a
There
voice
is,
on that?
as part of the annexation, there is a trip cap associated with that property. We're not sure, it will depend on what goes in there, how many trips per day they use of that cap. So that is something that it could affect significantly the development of that property. Maybe not so much. It's another one that we're kind of not so sure. I think the city's done a really good job at advocating for the interchange to as many regional state partners as we can. And it's kind of,
The 25-year process.
maybe.
Yeah.
But as I shared with the planning commission at the last meeting, ODOT does not have a lot of extra funding. In fact, they're reducing service in our region. I know that they are looking at bridges in terms of actual failing, which in an engineering world has a different meaning than what we think of as failing. So, prioritizing seismic retrofits in areas that are going to be critical in a disaster. In our region, prioritizing Beltline. So yes, the interchange may hinder that economic development asset that is the 107 acres.
Would there be any value in the planning commission going through over the span of next year chunks of the comprehensive plan and then using that comprehensive plan to inform us on buildable land inventory updates, urban growth boundary projections for the future? What do we want town to look like in 10, 20 years? That sound, and I don't expect people to go home and read 120 pages of comprehensive plan, but I think it's something that we could section off in chapters or chunks and go through at each meeting, making it manageable, a routine part of our agenda. And then maybe towards the end of 2024, take it to the next step and say, well, this is what we've got. What do we want to, how do we want to steer the ship 10 or 20 years down the road? Now, I know anything you plan 10 years in the future has a snowball's chance of really happening, but I think it's always good to at least have a plan to guide people in the future as to their decisions.
I think that's also something. Reviewing the comp plan is something that is also on the department work plan for the upcoming year. And so I think it would be beneficial for myself, and I'd love to hear what other commissioners think about becoming more familiar with that document together. Who's William?
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. Okay, great.
I like that a lot.
Is the comprehensive plan still on the city website under planning? You know,
I believe so.
so we could, if we wanted to. during
Yes.
Times of
It's there.
insomnia. go
Yes, if
ahead
you
and
have-
read it. Okay,
And should you want a paper copy, just let me know and I can have it ready for you at the front desk.
okay.
Comp plan, all the development codes, all that,
I thought so.
that I went through.
I thought so.
So right now, I've been on the planning commission on and off for 4 years, and I've learned over those 4 years just how dependent we are on money from the state and the feds. It doesn't always seem to be there. With the tough in the city, we finally at least can repair existing roads, but I know that doesn't have enough money in it for new roads or any expansion. Is there some guru in the state of Oregon who could talk to a small town planning commission and give us ideas on creative ways of generating grants and money and revenue?
We can find out. Revenue guru.
A revenue guru. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the head of Nike.
Grant gods.
Grant God.
Grant gods.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And that's something that doesn't have to be a rush, but it would, if we could find somebody who's been around the block a few times and knows Oregon well, that'd be worthwhile hearing their observations.
I think if we find that person, a lot of other people might be looking for him too. But I'll see what I can do.
I think the county would like that.
Is there anything else that we want to tackle? Yeah.
I just want to, when I was on the ad hoc committee that did a review of downtown Main Street and development, was a former counselor on there and a current counselor on at that time. And there was some concerns about going in and reviewing the subdivision code. And so I'm wondering, is that something that you're planning or we're planning or?
There was a specific individual that had concerns with that code. And I believe that her concern was more closely aligned with what Commissioner Marshall had mentioned and how the future street network would connect to our expansion. If this commission would like to review the subdivision code, we can most certainly put that on the plan. But I was having a hard time figuring out what the specifics of the subdivision section were. I think it was more related to the connection to transportation and the future street grid.
Yeah, just in the conversations we had there, somebody had mentioned trees, more trees should be planted, street lights should be required in subdivision, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I'm not sure what all that counselor was thinking
We
about.
did a
but-
lot of that.
Trees are required, street trees are required, street lights are not required. A lot of people in Coburg don't want them. And so in the newest subdivision, they were required to install conduit for streetlights, but not the streetlights themselves. So it's a possibility in the future, should that neighborhood ever say we'd like more light. But generally what we hear from the community is that we like the dark night sky.
Yeah, I agree. Check the night sky is more important.
But would you like to add it to the list? No, okay.
Any other thoughts about 2024 and the commission?
That's enough.
All right. City updates.
Well, the final thing we need to do is rank these.
Oh,
And I can give a couple options. I can put these 5 or 6 items into a survey that I can send out and we can finalize in January. Or we can just go through real quick right now, because these need to be completed, finalized, and ready to go to council by their retreat, which takes place the first week of February. So January would be at the latest we would finalize. If the commission feels up to it tonight, we can also do it, check the box, work plan done.
Since the master plan process training, master things out on the griddle, maybe that would be number one that we get.
Agree with number one on that.
Sound all right
And I
with you?
thought
Fine
it's-
by me, yeah.
Particularly interested in the comp plan review as well. Just be nice to be aware of it and if it's still relevant and if it needs to be updated at all.
You feeling good about it too there?
Good with that too.
I think Revenue Guru could actually go under our training.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
number one and number two.
Yeah.
I mean, the Patrick, and then the revenue guru.
Patrick and the Revenue Guru.
Yeah.
And we'd like to see that be number 3. Is that what I'm hearing?
Communications and
continue that.
What was it? Send out info.
Staff sending out more handout reading,
training
kind of
out,
homework,
I feel like that, yeah, it's a sub. meaning,
Right.
more of training. Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That work.
I think we might need a motion.
I think Commissioner Wood wants to make the motion.
Commissioner Wood, fantastic.
Since he,
I am dying to make a motion, and I agree. I make a motion that we to accept what we've decided for priorities.
Excellent.
I will second that.
All those in favor of that motion, raise your hand or say aye.
I,
Aye. Aye, Marissa.
this is here.
Yay, unanimous approval.
I know, just to, you guys, the comp plan is online, you can go and look it up and kind of read through it, and then maybe when we do reviews, be ready to ask questions.
Okay.
Kind of weird.
Are we ready for city updates at this point?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
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 I'm pulling up our city administrator's report right now. I'm just gonna read a few items that city administrator had included in his monthly report for council this month. One of the top highlights for the month was that we were not awarded for our buildable lands inventory grant. So council was informed of that. Another item was that the mayor had set up a meeting with the CEO of LTD, which is the transit provider in the Springfield Eugene region. And so a couple members of staff met with the CEO of LTD as well as our area's board representative, just to kind of have an initial conversation, start to develop a relationship about how to increase, or maybe not increase isn't the right word, but what does LTD's role look like here in the future, and what are they working on? They're doing a lot of strategic planning, a lot of evaluation about what's working and what's not working for their organization. And so just thinking about some conversations about what makes the most sense. Currently, the Route 96 comes out to Coburg. It very closely aligns with what were traditional manufacturing work hours, very early in the morning, goes back in the evening. So maybe that's not the best use of that time, that bus. And so it was a really, really great conversation to kind of start to build that relationship. Another item, I have to. Another item that you may have noticed is that Lane County is installing our flashing beacon crosswalk device on Mackenzie Street. So that has been a long time coming. We're pretty excited. It's happening, and it should be done before the new year.
Kids are gonna be bummed about not carrying the flag.
Oh,
Now they're gonna fight over pushing the button.
they can get the flags will still be available up here should you need to walk a couple blocks to get that flag.
Was that always part of the plan of when they improved the road? Put that beacon in?
No, no, that's something that the city requested, but because Lane County has jurisdiction of Willamette Street, took a little bit longer for the installation and the approval to take place. But Mackenzie was identified, especially with all our events in the summer. It's a really happening intersection. And so that's the first one. There may be possibilities to add some more in town. And that's something that the Transportation Safety Ad Hoc Committee will be discussing as well. I think that sums up our highlights for December. Does anyone have any questions for me?
You may not have the information, but I was curious, how are we doing on the new well for the city water system?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that information. The last that I heard, we were not getting as many. We were not getting as many gallons per minute as originally anticipated. And so I think that the city council will be looking at prioritizing water projects and whether trying to increase what we're getting from the well versus storage versus capacity. Where do we kind of want to prioritize what makes the most sense? Which also ties into the population estimates and how much demand for water do we have? Does it make more sense to look at retrofitting our existing storage containers? So more to come on water plan.
Any other updates or items to discuss before we adjourn?
Just a question too. we talked about the urban growth boundary city limits. Now, south of here, there's a half a street that's outside the city limits. The Christian or the next one, oh, what's it? Vintage, is it
Is it
Vintage?
vintage or Christian vintage maybe?
Maybe it's Vintage, it's half that street, the houses are not, or the lots are not in the city. Then the yellow house that's to the north at the end of Willamette Street is not also in the city? Is that something that could be cleaned up? And, or not sure how that process works, to tell you the truth. How do we annex something like that, or do you annex something?
I'm not entirely sure what that process looks like either. And I'm not sure why those decisions were made, but there are a couple on the north end of town. You'll notice it's kind of a notch that pops up. It pops in a couple houses, and then there's a few that are left out that are in the county. And so I don't know how that decision was made. I don't know if that would certainly be something that in urban growth boundary analysis would look at, of what areas make the most sense and perhaps cleaning that up. But I wouldn't guess it would be as simple as just making it a nice straight line.
Wasn't addressed in last time the urban growth boundary was done. Curious how that process works.
Yeah, that I'm not entirely sure of.
Training there. I'm just curious because I just recently found out about homes to the north not being in
Well, the city wouldn't be able to annex them. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not going to say because I don't know for sure.
Because if the urban growth boundary goes out that way and that area becomes annexed, all could get surrounded. I think they'd be forced to annex.
Just thoughts.
Anything else before we adjourn? Anybody got a burning question? All right, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and I want to wish everyone a nice, relaxing, happy holiday season while you're off.
You too.
Thank you.